Okay, imagine this. A patient has just beaten cancer. The tumors are gone, the body is physically on the mend, but right at that moment, the moment of recovery, they suddenly start to die. Now, this isn't some medical fluke. It's a real, terrifying paradox. So let's dive into this little-known condition where the very return of life becomes a fatal threat.
So get this. That was said by a woman whose spinal tumor had completely vanished. I mean, by all medical accounts, she was cancer-free. But instead of celebrating, she was just frozen by a terror so deep it would eventually kill her. And she wasn't afraid of the cancer coming back. No, she was terrified of something else entirely.
So that's the big mystery we're unpacking here. Why would someone who just climbed this impossible mountain suddenly collapse at the peak? Well, our source material gives this whole phenomenon a name, and it's a concept that might just change the way you think about what it means to heal.
It's called Anorgonia. And listen, this isn't about feeling sad or being depressed. The source describes it as a literal, physical state where parts of the body, or even the whole thing, become functionally dead. It's like the life force, the very energy that makes us feel alive, just grinds to a halt.
And this is what it feels like from the inside, in the patient's own words. A feeling of having zero vitality, a deep, profound stiffness, a sense of being paralyzed, and this feeling that you can't even be touched. You're completely shut down, armored against everything. But of all the symptoms, there's one that is just uniquely terrifying. And that symptom is called falling anxiety. Now, it is so important to understand this is not what we think of as a fear of heights. Not even close. It's something way deeper and a lot more primal.
Okay, so let's break this down, because this distinction is key. Acrophobia, the fear of heights, is a psychological fear of an external danger, falling off a building. But falling anxiety is an internal event. It's the actual physical sensation that your own body is collapsing inward, that you're just shattering and falling into a black hole of nothingness.
And according to the source, this is not a delusion. It's not in their head. It's the patient's perception of a very real biophysical event. Their life energy is literally violently contracting, pulling away from their skin and their limbs, and rushing towards their core. They are feeling their own internal world just collapse on itself.
Which brings us right back to that bizarre paradox. Why on earth would this happen to someone who is getting better? Why would the body's energy suddenly retreat in absolute terror at the precise moment of healing? Well, the answer, it's just as shocking as the problem itself. The trigger is something called pleasure anxiety. And yeah, you heard that right. It is, quite literally, a profound fear of feeling good. It's a terror of the very sensation of your life force coming back, of energy finally flowing through a body that has kept it locked down and suppressed for maybe decades. For these people, the feeling of getting well is perceived as a life-threatening event.
So here's how this tragic cycle plays out. First, the therapy works, right? Life energy starts to come back. But the body, which has been armored against this feeling for a lifetime, freaks out. That's the pleasure anxiety. So as a defense, the body slams on the brakes and triggers a total shutdown, yanking all that energy inward. The patient then experiences this massive retreat as that terrifying falling anxiety, which just throws him right back into the paralyzed state of anorgonia. Healing itself becomes the new trauma.
And these examples just show you the devastating, real-world consequences. The woman with spinal cancer, paralyzed by her own returning health, the prostate cancer patient who was getting stronger but collapsed in terror the second he tried to walk, and maybe most tragically, a man with a shoulder tumor who, upon feeling his life force finally surge back, strangled himself just to make the sensation stop.
So, the crucial point from the source is this. These patients didn't die from their cancer. They died from anorgonia. They died from a deep biological terror of their own life coming back. I mean, what a devastating conclusion.
You have to wonder, right? A defense mechanism this powerful, this deeply buried in the nervous system, it doesn't just show up in adulthood. So where does it all start? Well, the source traces it back to the very, very first moments of life.
The source traces this entire pattern, this whole lifelong condition, all the way back to a tiny 3-week-old newborn. The key to understanding all of this was found in the observation of a single infant's panic attack. So here's what the researchers saw. You have a healthy baby, just full of life, and this powerful, instinctual need for contact. They're reaching out with their energy. But the environment, in this case parents who are emotionally armored or just unresponsive, couldn't meet that energy. The infant's vibrant, searching life force basically hit a brick wall.
And when that energy found nowhere to go, it had to retreat, so it violently contracted back into the infant's little body. The baby experienced that internal collapse as a terrifying, groundless fall, its very first hit of falling anxiety. That shock then caused the body to form its very first physical armor, a set of muscles that tightened up and froze as a defense.
And that moment, that very first shutdown, is what the source calls a biological resignation. The infant learns a devastating lesson. To reach out with my life force is dangerous and terrifying. And that becomes the blueprint, the default setting for an entire lifetime of holding back, of suppressing one's own vitality.
So this leads to the source's most profound and maybe controversial conclusion. If this lifelong pattern of shutting down our own energy is at the root of what it calls cancerous atrophy, then true prevention doesn't start with diet or exercise when you're 40. It starts with protecting the emotional and energetic freedom of a newborn from their very first breath.
You know, this leaves us with a really challenging thought, because this isn't just about these clinical cases. It's a question for all of us. If any living, vibrant energy that isn't met with an equal living response learns to shut down and turn inward, what does that say about our world? It really makes you wonder, how are we treating the living energy in our children, in our environment, and ultimately in ourselves?